Got it.
Oh, there. Hi, it's Carol.
Carol?
Yes.
Nope, I just said hi.
Hi.
We're going to get started in 2.5 minutes.
Are there others on the call?
Yes, there are.
Oh, good. Gotcha.
Okay.
Robin, if you want to take a couple extra minutes for people to get on board, I'm fine waiting a few.
Okay, I'll wait another 2 minutes.
Make it 3.
Make it 3, you got it. We are streaming live on YouTube. That's kind of cool. Okay. Okay. Aw. Okay. All righty.
People are still coming in, so whatever you want to do,
I see that.
I'm fine because we're getting a rush of people.
Okay. We're getting a rush.
It's only 5:31, so
No. I see that. Oh my gosh. We're getting a rush. Okay, I'm going to give it another minute and then I'm going to get started if they missed the intro. Oh, give it another minute. I just like to start on time. So.
but it's rainy. Whatever you want to do, I'm fine waiting just a couple because they're pouring in.
Okay. Okay, people. 1 more minute and I'm going to get started.
There's a question in the chat box, Catherine. I think you could hit.
Oh, the URL, I don't know. We're on YouTube.
I'll post that, no problem.
Okay, great. Well, clearly, this is a very, a topic that people are very interested in. So good evening, everybody. I'm Robin Rubin, instructor at the Sandler School of Social Work at FAU. It is so wonderful to see so many people here this evening. As you most likely know, it's when we feel the most stressed, the most overwhelmed, that we need to hit the pause button and invest in ourselves. Then we can get back to our to-do list and things that we have to do after we take some time for some self-care. So I really hope that you will seriously consider joining us for more of our workshops that we have going on this year, this upcoming year. We have a whole schedule of workshops, and I hope you'll join us for some of them. So let's get started with tonight's program. Strengthening connections with your adult children. As we go along, please use the chat box to post answers to questions from Dr. David and questions you'd also like answered towards the end of the program. We will leave some time for questions, for you to ask some questions. So let me introduce our speaker for this evening. Dr. David Wohlsifer, who we warmly call in the School of Social Work, Dr. David. He's a clinical instructor at the Phyllis and Harvey Sandler School of Social Work and a psychotherapist and the founder of the Boca Raton Center for Psychotherapy. He earned his MSW at the University of Pennsylvania, his Master's of Healthcare Administration from St. Joseph's University, and his PhD in Human Sexuality from the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. Dr. Wohlsifer did his postgraduate work at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine Center for Cognitive Therapy, where after completion, he retained a position as a psychotherapist and a clinical educator for several years. He is an LCSW in Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington. And he's also a certified sex therapist in Florida. He has nearly 30 years of experience in a clinical practice. His areas of clinical practice include cognitive behavioral therapy, couples and family therapy, substance abuse, and sex therapy. He is also published in the areas of clinical social work education, family and couples therapy, as well as sex therapy, and multiculturally competent practice. He is an advisory editor for the Family Therapy Journal and Family Process. He's also a diplomat of the Academy of Cognitive Therapy, a certified sex therapist, and a member of the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. This is a lot of stuff. He's also the co-chair of the American Family Therapy Academy, Couple Therapy Interest Group, and a former chair of the Jewish Family Interest Group. He's also the father of 2 adult children, and he also has 2 grandchildren. So not only all of this stuff, which is a lot of stuff, but he's also my friend, and I am so happy and honored to introduce him to you all tonight. Dr. David, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen. I am really happy to shout out that one of my children, Stephanie, and my grandson, Alex, happen to be on this call as well. So let me give them the necessary shout outs. Can everybody see my screen okay? I want to give a few thank yous, and can you all hear me okay? Give me some nods. All right. So a couple thank yous. Robin Rubin, thank you for inviting me and being my sounding board, friend, and brainstormer as I prepared this talk. Jeff Landsman and Lori Suttenberg for consulting with me as I prepared. The advisory board at the Robin Rubin Center for Happiness and Life Enhancement for inviting me. Ashley Zantop and Catherine Fraser-Jones for their work in organizing this program. And of course, to our adult children, Stephanie and Allie, my son-in-laws, David and Jason, and my grandchildren, whose love always inspires me to be a better parent and grandparent. I use everything we're talking about on myself. So welcome. Do me a favor and take a moment. And in the chat box, say hello to me. I want to make sure everybody knows how to use the chat feature. So click on the chat feature. Say hello, because we're going to be using this for the Q&A section of the talk, which Robin will be facilitating during our last 15 minutes today. And if you have any questions while the talk is going on, type it into the chat box, and I will address it during the Q&A. Let me see how people are doing saying hello. I see friends of mine from Philadelphia here, so thank you for coming. Students, co-faculty, I really appreciate you all being here. Marcy Fox, my office mate, thank you. Hi, Marianne. All right. And there is also a raise your hand prompt. So if there are times when I bring up topics that we're going to discuss, everybody practice using the raise your hand prompt, which I believe we can find. Catherine, do you know where the raise your hand prompt is?
I do. The bottom of your screen, all the way almost to the right, it should say reactions with a little smiley face and a plus sign hairdo. Click on reactions, and then right above it at the bottom of that menu, you should see raise hand, and then lower hand, which will be important in a moment, I'm guessing.
Yes. And Catherine, my slides look good to you? You can see them?
Very good. Thank you. If you want to make
Okay.
that, if you want to put it in presentation mode, you can, but that's up to you.
I kind of like it like this
Go for it.
because there's something that could happen. All right, so later on, we might use the raise your hand feature. I've been a teacher a number of years, so we all have to chat. You all have the raise your hand. Let's go with it. Let me give you the perspective of this talk. In my mind, I'm speaking to the parents of adult children. Though many of us, myself included, my mother's 92, are the children of living parents. So we're also dealing with the issues of aging of our parents who might be ahead of us. So we are adult children. We may have adult children, or there may be adult children in the room too. The term adult child I use today is not to be confused with the common term adult child when associated with children of alcoholics. I simply mean people who have reached adulthood who are somebody's kid. Make sense? So just a word of caution. This is a brief talk. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to address the questions of how to best communicate with your adult children. Dynamics in these situations are often influenced by gender, class, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, economics. For example, somebody may be financially supporting their adult children, or their adult children might be supporting them. Geography, business arrangements. Maybe you're in business with your adult child, or their spouse. Family structures, are parents divorced, remarried, living, gone, and health status. My talk is brief and general. My suggestions today are meant for the context of everyday communications interactions. And there are times and situations that are more complex and challenging, which are beyond the scope of this talk and may need assistance from a therapist with expertise in family therapy to address. So I just put that out there as a caveat and a context to understand. And allow me to present you my favorite slide. I like to always start by honoring the ancestors. Years ago, I was at a talk on Afrocentric psychotherapy, and I said, why haven't we learned this in Judaism? I want to honor my ancestors when I begin everything. Showing me the ratio. This is my family in 1904. This is my great-grandmother, Ida Green, my great-grandfather, Morris Green. She's pregnant with my grandmother here, my great-aunt, my other great-aunt, and my great-grandmother's brother and sister-in-law. And I always keep them in my head, and they're kind of very alive to me. Anybody else have a similar picture at home? People who look like this? So these are my peeps, and I always have them in my mind. Let me check the chat box and see if I'm getting any responses. Marianne says yes. Anybody else? Same picture? So Jeffrey says yes. So part of why I love working with families, and probably my favorite things to do are work with families and couples and doing family therapy, is that every family has a story which is embedded in the history of the generations that came before them. These stories are rich and complex, sadly filled with trauma. All of these people were refugees from violence in Russia and Poland. This is my family on the Lower East Side in 1904, and it's because of their bravery that I'm here today, and probably likely the bravery of many of your ancestors that you're here too. Had these people not gotten on a boat and left Russia and Poland, coming to probably what felt like nowhere, chances are I wouldn't be here. So they're always in my mind, and they're probably the generations that I learned most of what I know about parenting from, and probably for a lot of us too. I keep these people in my mind like a comic chorus from a Woody Allen film. I've only ever met out of them the baby here. She was my great aunt, and she was quite elderly when I met her, but they're very alive to me. And you know, sometimes at night when I give my cat her Prozac, I think to myself, what would they say about me having a cat that takes Prozac? Sometimes when I complain about working, I sit in an office in Boca Raton or a classroom and I say, how do you feel about that? Or tell me about your family. They all worked in sweatshops on the Lower East Side. What they call work and what I call work probably feels really different. So I wonder what they would think of what I call work. When I complain about flying on an uncomfortable airline seat, I think to myself, they all threw up for 3 weeks on the bottom of a ship in steerage. What would they say about me saying that I don't like to fly? commercial or, God forbid, an airline that doesn't give me a drink. So as I prepared for this talk, I did like I always do in my mind, and I turned to my ancestors and I put my clinical and my academic credentials aside, and I said to my ancestral team, I turned to them for some New York City turn of the 20th century tenement kitchen table wisdom. And I said, how would you advise parents to best communicate with their adult children? I thought about their responses, and I got a response. And surprisingly, when they talked to me from the other side, I understand Yiddish. And they said, was denkst du, David, Kinder? What are you thinking, David? Children? Speak to your children any way you want. You're still the parent. Once a kid, always your kid. We left Russia at 16 and never saw or spoke to our parents again. Your kids don't know how lucky they are to still have parents. At this point, you see the call came from heaven. I had to pretend it dropped because basically families have changed. And the way my ancestors probably thought and your ancestors thought we speak to our kids is something very different. In the past, in many cultures still, parents know best, and being the elder gave you the voice, being the younger took away your voice. But that's no longer the case, and things are really different. So let me go over some skills that might be helpful that I probably don't think my ancestors would agree with, but you know what? Times have changed. To get us started, here's some scenarios. I want you to picture what an adult child might say to their parent. Can we offer my spouse a job in the family business? I think they have a lot to offer the organization. They even have some ideas they like to share with you. The adult child might say to the parents, we, adult child and spouse, need to talk to you about some of the language you used around our child. This was said to a friend of mine who called her granddaughter pretty. Her son and daughter-in-law were not happy with that. I know the holidays are coming. However, we, adult child and spouse, are likely to be only able to spend a few hours at your house when we're in town. We'll let you know when we're available. Oh, we need you guys, the parents, to help us with the down payment for the new house. We've decided to increase our price range. And let me flip the script. A parent says to their adult child, unless you proceed the way we think is best, we are not able to help you. A parent says, I don't care what your spouse thinks. Or, who are you to tell me how I can talk to my grandchild? I raised you. Let's pause for a moment, and I'd like to get your thoughts. What do these scenarios leave parents feeling? And if you could use that raise your hand prompt, and Catherine will recognize you, or Ashley. What do thoughts like this and comments like this leave parents feeling? You've got one up. I can't hear you. Kath, you have to unmute.
Rachel, go for
Rachel
it.
Stern's up.
Sure. Some parents may feel guilt or shame regarding their children speaking to them this way, feeling judged that maybe they did something wrong because their children are doing something different, or they could possibly feel angry that after everything they've sacrificed for their children, they're getting a lot of pushback in the form of boundaries.
Did you like the ancestor picture, by the way? I bet you have one just like that.
I do.
Thank you, Rachel. Catherine, I'll let you proceed.
Yeah, I apologize if I don't say your name correctly. Parbati Manbad?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for having me.
Good
As
evening.
an adult parent, you try to do
Feeling.
the best. And sometimes because you went through hardship, I can associate with Dr. David. My 4 parents came from India in the ship, and because they did all that suffering, you try to do the best for your kids, and you want them to grow in your way that you knows best, but they have other ideas. So that's all.
Thank you. So you know what it's like too to have that
You're
passed on
welcome.
generation. Thank you. Go ahead. What else might this leave parents feeling? Anybody else want to take a shot at it?
I'll take a shot if nobody's going to
Go ahead. Of course, you're here to participate.
I think it might make them feel kind of like devalued, or perhaps even useless. Like, what is my job if I can't advise you as my kid what you should do?
Yeah. What is my job if you don't want my advice? Andrea Schnorrucker?
How about they might feel unappreciated?
Sure.
They might feel disrespected.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's old school though,
Yeah. But the feelings are real, aren't they?
Absolutely. For some they are, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea.
Elise, go for it. Elise Nevid.
They also would feel out of control, as this
Mhm.
is a relationship that they've controlled most of the time with this child, and now they're not it's up to them, it's up to the spouse. There are
Mhm.
other players on the field.
Yeah. What's it like to lose that control? That's huge. There's a
Not great.
blessing. Not great, right? And yet at the
Not
same
great,
time, mhm,
but you
and
have
I
no
want
choice.
and I want to acknowledge how different this can be sometimes too, with mothers and fathers, with different parents too, the way these things can play out. Um, are there any other hands up right now? Thank you. Catherine, what do these situations leave the children feeling? So many of us on the call who are parents, again, we were also and still are the children. Go ahead,
Parvati,
Catherine.
go for it. You're up.
I feel like I'm in class with my professor.
You mean
You
you're
are?
not?
I'm always raising my hand for the question, and she goes,
I
"Let
love
somebody
that.
else speak."
Mhm.
So, to that question, they have the right to do as they please. That's what the adult children tell you. They want to be heard. They want to be in control and see where it leads. And they will tell you this is the 21st century. We like your ideas, but not so much. We can modify it. Sometimes the way they modify it is not the best, but you just have to let them weigh it out. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. And you participate as much as you want. It makes it nice for me as the presenter. I welcome it.
Thank you.
Please.
Elise?
It also is, now I just lost my train of thought. It also is, you've raised your children, you wanted this outcome. You've wanted this, you wanted to raise children that are capable of being independent, have a spirit, have a direction, feel confident enough to go there. And you're entitled to disapprove of it, but you're not entitled to, it's not, you have to let natural consequences happen. Either it's going to work for them or it's not, but it's not really up to you at this point. You've done what you're supposed, you've done the thing, and people before you did the thing for you too. That's it.
Thank you. No, thank you. This is that's so important though. This is what we planned on happening. We planned on turning these people into adults. You've got Rachel Stearns.
Okay, Rachel, you're up.
What do the children leave feeling?
I think that they could leave feeling a lot of different ways. I think for some children, it's really empowering to be able to say these things to their parents and kind of break some of the bonds that have been stuck between them. If there's been trauma or difficulty, it can be really empowering to finally put down boundaries. I think it could also be really guilt-inducing when you have strong connections to your parents and saying things that you know might upset them. So I think it could probably be a lot of these things, and also at the same time, and also really frustrating because not all parents are going to respect or understand that. And so you have to deal with that feedback also.
Yeah, how about when both of them are in different places? Or maybe you have step parents, and you've got 4 of them in different places. This question I like to think about a lot with all relationships. But in this case, what do we want our relationships with our adult children or our parents, depending on your perspective, to look like? And Elise alluded to this briefly when she said, this is what we planned on, but what do we want these relationships to look like?
Andrea.
What do we want? We want it to feel good. We want it to feel mutually respectful. We want healthy boundaries. we wanted to feel respectful and easy and hassle-free, and safe.
Mhm.
I
Safe
could
is a
go
big
on all
one.
night, but
No, but safe is a really big one.
you have to be able to feel safe, to be honest, even when it's difficult.
Mhm. I think in safety and in honesty comes more genuine connection.
Mhm.
Thank you, Andrea. Catherine, do your thing.
Robin, you are up next.
Goodness. So, I think as parents, we like put our hearts and our souls into our children, as they're growing up. And yeah, like Elise said, we want them to, fly the coop and go do their thing. And then when they start to do their thing, sometimes their thing doesn't fit into our thing. And that's a challenging situation. Because I think as parents, we want to stay close to our children. We have this vision of what we want, and it's having our children in our lives. And so, like Andrea said, we want it to feel good. We want to be with them, spend time with them, be involved in their lives. And like I said, sometimes their vision doesn't look the same, and it ends up, we have to accept that, I guess.
Our-Body, would
Thank
you
you.
like to take it away?
Yes, for me, I would like to have shared ideas. They should be able to compromise. And it goes back to Maslow hierarchy of needs, where they can feel safe, love, belonging, and you, the parent, feel a sense of gratification that what you set out to, you had goals of planning after you married, what your family would be like, how many kids, how you want to raise them. And as you start to achieve these goals in life, you will tend to feel that gratification, because later as you age, you look back and you reflect to see what you did, how it was done, and the best way. If it could change, what you would have changed. But at that time now, you can't change. You can only amend.
You said something, and as you were speaking, the word mutuality went through my mind, that we want to be in a place of mutuality with our kids. One of my friends calls it emotional harmony. But that's what I heard you say too. Am I right?
Yes, close to that. I'm a student, so I'm trying to use all that I know.
No, and I'm glad you're here. And welcome
Thank
to all the
you.
students that are here.
Thanks.
I'm going to go to the chat box. Rachel Stern writes, but don't all parents want that? There are parents, but not all parents. There are parents that want closeness without openness or safety, or don't value boundaries. Elise writes, I think as parents, we still want to feel wanted if no longer needed. Any other hands up? Let's look at this last question. How do we want to feel? And use feeling words for this. How do you want to feel in these relationships, either as parent or child? Feel free to talk about both. How do you want to feel?
Robin, I see your hand up.
One of the words that comes to mind is I want to feel respected. And I want to feel loved.
Are you talking as a child, or are you talking as a parent, or both?
I'm talking as a parent.
Both.
As a
Parents,
parent.
okay.
Both children. I
Parent
want
respected and loved.
Yeah.
That's what you said, right?
Care. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to feel like they care.
Unlike, that famous book about raising teenagers, what is it called? Mom, I hate you. Will you drive me to the mall? We want to move away from that teenage model of a more mutual model. Thank you. Susan Cohn, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So I also said loved, and along the lines of what you were saying, also appreciated. Like the driving to the mall. Well, do you appreciate what I do? I mean, as a parent, I think that's important. Not that I need to, have you kowtow to me, but rather just, appreciate what I've done for you.
Sure. And to recognize it. Thank you. Amy, can you unmute? I see you wrote you can't get your hand to raise. So unmute and talk for a moment.
I feel like, hi, I'm sorry.
Hi.
When I go to my reactions, it only gives me 5 of them. So, and one of them is not a hand raiser, sorry. Anyway, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about our children, or even when we talk about our parents, we feel like we're walking on eggshells, that, that quote. And it's uncomfortable. You want to be able to say how you feel and not like what everyone else is saying, not be judged, not feel like they're going to, cut off ties or don't want to feel threatened by them at any time. And I also feel like it has a lot to do with, if your children no longer financially need you, create a whole different world.
Huge different world.
Yeah. So,
yeah, money complicates a lot of things, right?
Yeah, or it gives them the opportunity to basically say, I don't really need you. So we still want to be needed. Like I think Elise mentioned, we want to be needed. Even though they might not.
The needs may
need us anymore.
And the needs may differ. I'd like to think that everybody in every relationship has something to need though, right?
Yeah.
There's a need to be fulfilled. Thank you. Some comments in the chat box. Oh, good. Catherine, unmute and share what you're saying.
Just that as adult children, speaking as an adult child, we want to feel respected too. That all of that hard work that our parents went through for us to pay for college, to pay for, experiences and wanting us to have it better than they had it, to maybe respect us enough to question, perhaps maybe I should give their point of view some thought.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about one of my most jarring experiences for myself as the child of adult parents when I realized my father was not going to take my car to be fixed. I was in my 20s, I was working, and I had a car problem. And he said, well, I guess you're going to have to fix it. And I thought, well, you mean you're not going to come get it at my house and drive it and repair it? And at that moment, I had to realize too that my need of them and their availability had changed.
That's right.
He was going to let me solve some of my own problems, and I actually didn't particularly like it at first. So let me get a pulse in the chat box. How's everybody feeling so far as we're going along? I always like to check in with the group when I'm working.
Marilyn Sharwat, gets a little more complicated when your adult child is married, brings another dynamic. Yeah, that's for sure.
Whole other dynamic. Because now you've got your kid, their spouse, and often their spouse's family. Or families. There may be multiple families involved. Changes everything. So let me keep going. I'm going to go into some skills. And this was one of the best things I heard about parenting adults. And this is the biggest takeaway I have for you. It's about a shift. Parents, as our children grow, we need to shift from being the CEO to consultant when it comes to your adult child. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's so important. We shift from CEO to consultant when it comes to your adult children. Quoting Tess Brigman and LMFT from the Bay Area says, this phase of parenthood is not about running the company and being in charge of their life as you were when they were a dependent, but instead, parenting adult children may mean offering expert advice and guidance that adult children can implement. Again, you are no longer the CEO, but now you are a consultant. And for many of us who have known people who have gone from CEO to consultant, it's not so easy. When your name was on the door and now you're a consultant to the business. I'm going to add to this comment, offering expert advice and guidance when they want it or are able to receive it, as well as accepting when they might not be interested in the advice. Sometimes we have to accept that people might not be interested in our advice. And that could be a cultural barrier too. But how can this shift, Robin, I see your hand coming up to this question maybe, how can this shift of position actually improve the relationship and overall quality of life for you and your family. Take it, Robin.
So I have learned from making mistakes that I don't give my advice unless they say, "What do you think?" And, I had to learn that by making a lot of mistakes and giving my advice where you don't know what you're talking about. And, you're not me, and et cetera, and, getting smacked in the face. And so now I'll actually, when they ask me something, I'll say, "Do you want me to tell you what I think?" I just have to clarify.
You shifted. Did you say that 25 years ago to them?
No way. I just told them.
You were the CEO. Yeah.
Now I'm sometimes the consultant.
Consultant as needed, right? Per diem. Catherine, I'll let you call the people.
Sure. Rachel Stern, you are up.
I think it builds really strong bonds because it's the difference between offering someone validation or offering someone advice. I mean, ideally they go hands in hand, but there's like one of the worst things is when you just want to talk to somebody and share how you're feeling and they're silver lining or offering advice and all you're looking for is someone to talk to. And so switching from being a manager of someone's life, no matter the age, to being a consultant, it actually strengthens your relationship just in and of itself by giving them what they're looking for.
Nice. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, Susan.
So also I find that when we make that shift where if we were before as the CEO, our adult child can really appreciate our having kind of adjusted and shown them that we respect them and that we accept their decisions if we've changed our behavior.
As you said that, I thought it also gives people a space to grow. As simple as my example was when I realized my father wasn't going to solve my problem for me or take care of it as he had done all along, it taught me skills for problem solving.
Elise?
Including needing to save my money to pay for the repair that he wasn't going to pay for. Go ahead.
One of the shifts I've had was from even as my children were married and still thinking that my relationship was more important than their relationship with their other family, because after all, they were our family, is less is more. And kind of, it's like not just being asked your advice or waiting to be asked, but giving them the space to make the choices and hope that they do make some in your direction. And hope that hope that they recognize that there's not equality, it's not always equal, it's not always fair, and it doesn't always feel good. But at the end of the day, they're juggling. And if you can think of it in their world, that it's not a no-brainer for them either to just pick you over. It's whatever. It's something I've learned. It definitely is not. Only learned it over the years of it not feeling good. So I had to shift my perspective on how to make this feel better. And that is to expect it less.
You said a phrase that spoke to my heart when you said, hope they make some in your direction. Because I think when you said that, I felt the vulnerability of the parent too.
It's true.
Listen, felt it,
We all want to be wanted. We want to be loved. Absolutely. And we want to be wanted. And as I don't know, I mean, and at the end, it's all a crapshoot anyway. I mean, you don't always guarantee it anyway. So that's it.
No, but I think when you spoke, I just heard that too. I'm going to speak to the parents in the room. We are vulnerable in this too, right? We get hurt. And we want to be wanted too, and in the right ways. Thank you. Go ahead, Catherine.
Dr. David, we have time for one more.
Sure. And then please draw your attention to the chat box when you can too. There's some great comments.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, okay. Robin, I'm going to defer chat box to you if that's okay, and I'll handle in-person questioners. Yeah. So, Parbati, you are up.
So with the shift, I look at for the kids to be self-use determination and enhance their communication skill, improve their growth, and improving their independence in making choices. And these choices can be critical at a time in their life, or it could be regarding their job, a merge of a company. These will be, you're testing their ability to see how they can function, and you just sit back as a teacher and you go, whoa, they did it.
And it feels good, doesn't it, sometimes?
Yes.
So let me shift us a little further. I'm going to go over some strategies. And I gave all of these on a handout, which Ashley or Catherine can share with all of you. So one of the first strategies I want to go over when working or dealing with our adult children is to speak to one another like adults. Watch for lapses when you go back into old communication patterns, where children act like their younger selves and you are back to CEO. We could all do this really easily on both sides. As per Epstein, if this happens, take a step back and shift into speaking more like adults. It's okay to draw your children's attention or your child's attention to this dynamic, and I'd encourage you to have fun with it. For instance, say to them, look at us. It's like you're in 8th grade again. Let's try this conversation again as adults. Shift the conversation. A second strategy is to take responsibility for the relationship on both sides, which you can hear in all the comments people are making both verbally and in the chat box. Both parents and adult children are responsible for this relationship. Here's where my ancestors probably would have disagreed. They would have said, nope, it only goes up. Both of us are responsible for this relationship. You have to row the boat together or you'll spin in circles. So don't wait for the other one to do the work of building and maintaining the relationship. That's often where resentment grows, when we sit back and wait for somebody else to do something that we really want from them. Learn constructive conflict skills. Avoid guilt trips. Avoid silent treatments. Watch for passive aggression and screaming. Everybody needs to be aware of their role in these cycles. And my suggestion, try to use I statements. Talk from a place of what I feel as opposed to you. I think you're of an age where you can take care of your car now. I think it'll be really helpful for you to do that, as opposed to you're 24, take care of your own car. I took care of my car at your age. Creates a very different experience in the body when I say I, as opposed to you. Any questions before I go further? Ellen just said here in the chat box, I think it's important not to project our fears onto our children, to let them experience things in life, even though it might be uncomfortable. There's a great book about parenting, and the title says it all, Ellen. It's called The Blessing of the Skinned Knee. Think about that, The Blessing of the Skinned Knee. Jeffrey, I'm about to go to Power Over and Power With. I think you saw the slide, so thank you for the setup. Right, there's no hands up, right? No. Respect boundaries. And I think earlier Rachel talked about boundaries. We don't talk about this a lot. This goes both ways. I think as parents, we're told to respect our children's boundaries, but what about ours? I have a friend who lost her husband at a young age, and she was deciding whether or not to date again. And her rabbi said to her, you got a choice, become a professional babysitter or build your own life. And she realized at this point, she needed to have some boundaries because she was on her way to becoming a professional babysitter. And she was a widow in her 50s. Both parties need to determine their level of privacy and respect them. And that changes at all times. You know, somebody mentioned, I think it was Elise, that when your kids have a spouse or even a partner, or they're dating somebody, the boundaries suddenly start changing. I mean, how many of you remember bringing somebody home to your parents' house and thinking, oh boy, there better be some boundaries in place? I remember I brought a friend home from college, and he had never been with a family like mine, this New Yorkie Jewish family. He was from rural Michigan. And at one point I found him in my room shaking, and I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, they're all screaming at each other. And I said, no, they're not. They're just talking about Black Friday sales. But he wasn't used to that level of energy. And I should have had him a little more prepared about what to expect and talk to my family a little bit more about how to be in front of some people. But they were really just talking about sales. Catherine just posted the link to the handout in case anybody would like it, of everything I'm going over. Let me check the chat. Yeah, it is cultural. accept feedback. And this is sometimes painful. Sometimes we don't hear what we want to hear. But I think it makes us become better parents if we listen to it. And same for children too. Healthy and respectful communication is an integral part of good family relationships. This is where text messages can really fail you. And some things, I don't know if other people feel this way, please tell me in the chat. Some things are better not via text message. What do people think of that? Can I get some feedback in the chat box? Are there some things you think we shouldn't text? You can't read tone, Rachel writes. Politics, right? Robin, go ahead.
You know, our kids text everything. It doesn't matter what it is. And what I do with my younger son is I'll say, just let me know when you have, 2 or 3 minutes to talk. I don't want to do this over text. So I just ask permission there's certain things I don't want to talk to him over text. They want to talk about everything over text, and so I just ask permission, give me some time.
Yeah, and I think in part of determining boundaries, there are times to say, like Marion says, some things are better with text, some things aren't. It's up for us to determine when it's not right for us. And Robin just said it. She'll say sometimes, I don't want to go by text. I don't want to do it by text. One of my friends who I was going over this with said she has 2 adult children, but David, my kids text 95% of the time. I'm going to say that a lot of our conversations can be text. If I'm asking you when we're meeting for dinner, when's your flight in, what time do we have to pick you up, we can do that by text. How'd the baby do at school today? Send me a Halloween picture. We can do that by text. But as things get more complex, my recommendation is to be cautious of text, because it does, as somebody said here, lose connection. It can get out of control. There's some things that I think are good to talk about. Jen, I'm going to take your question. Would you mind unmuting it?
Me? You're talking to me?
Yeah, Jen Savrick. Hi.
Hi. So yes, so my son and daughter-in-law, expect me to be their nanny for their children. And my daughter-in-law doesn't work, but so that she can do what she wants to do. And I've had the conversation with my son about it, and it's my life, and I have other things that I'm doing with my life, and he doesn't respect that. And he said, look, I understand that. If it were me, I'd want to spend every minute with my children. Okay, that's fine. I understand it. And so they've really, and her parents live here, but her mother works full time. And so they really have pretty much distanced themselves from me and exclude me from their lives.
I'm sorry. You brought up something really important too when you said their mother works full time, and often her mother is the assumption then that your time doesn't matter if you don't.
And I do, and for those of you who know me, a lot of people on this Zoom know me, and I'm involved in a lot of charitable work, and I do a lot of things that are pro bono, but take a lot of my time. But it's
still your time, and that's your time. I bring you back to this slide about respecting boundaries. What I hear you saying in this is, my son and daughter-in-law aren't respecting my boundaries.
That is true. And I don't know how to overcome that. And so if I want to see my grandchildren, I have to beg to go over and find a way to bring a present or to do something, but I'm excluded from holidays or activities or doing anything with them.
I'm sorry. And you can only be part of it because you're only 50% of it. They're the other 50%. If you try to talk to them about it, how does it go?
Not well. Oh, no, not well. Oh, no. And it's ugly. Yeah, not well.
I'm sorry. Did I hit your question about boundaries being key here? It's a boundary issue.
Well, yeah, but it is, but yes, you know what? And I don't know that there's a solution to that if someone isn't willing to accept that other side of it, right? To be part of their lives and do things.
It requires respect. Both parties are responsible for the relationship, parent and child.
Right. So
if you say I have limits and they say, well, that doesn't matter, you can't do anything with that.
right. And so people say, oh, isn't it wonderful that your children are here and live here and you get to, no.
I think people, you're getting some comments in the chat box of support from some of the parents in the room, I think.
They're being brats. I like that. Yes. It is. Yeah. It's
and it's not nice. I think people have to be very cautious about when they say, oh, you must have it so great. I have a friend that has one child and she almost died delivering her. And people always say to her, why don't you have more than one child? And she said, do I really have to go in my complex OBGYN history with everybody who says that? People don't realize what they say when they say things and truly how hurtful it can be.
So,
aren't you so lucky?
Yeah, you know what? I do what I can. I'm always offering. I offered. I always try to offer something up in order to be part of their lives. So I do what I can, but it isn't forthcoming. So
I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you. And maybe this will give us a good lead in. And Jeff, this is the slide you were alluding to and the article you were alluding to. One of my favorite colleagues' work is Mona Fishbane. She writes a lot about interpersonal neurobiology, how we impact each other neurobiologically speaking. And she says, and I'll go over this, strive for power to and power with rather than power over in your relationships with adult children. What does that mean? And she talks about relational empowerment, being strong in our relationships, includes power to, the ability to live according to one's higher values and goals, and power with, the capacity, I love this languaging, to co-create. Jan, this is what's missing from what you were talking about. It's not being co-created. To co-create, both of you writing it, a respectful relationship. She writes power over interactions, where we take power. I pay for your car. I paid for your college. I'm giving you that down payment. You get to see your grandchildren. Power over interactions that are informed by neurobiology and cultural assumptions. When people start with power over, they're getting people into their fight or flight. Power to is the ability to self-regulate, to read and manage one's emotions, and to have voice while respecting the other person's voice. Power with reflects people's commitment to co-nurture their relationships through empathy, respect, and generosity. Take a moment and read that, and I'm going to give you a brief one-on-one of neurobiology. Just check the chat. I think we're doing okay time-wise. So take a look at my fist, and you might want to put up your fist too. This is the human brain. This is the front part where you think. Flip the lid. This is the mid part where you feel. And here's your spine going down your central nervous system. When we get really angry, we flip our lids and we're not thinking rationally. Who here has ever got so mad they said the things they should never have said? But the next thing you know, they're coming out of your mouth. Don't tell anybody. It got me thrown out of a Wendy's once, but that's a whole other story. I got thrown out of a Wendy's. Can you believe it? Because I flipped my lid at the cashier and she flipped her lid back at me and she got fired and I got kicked out. Maybe I shouldn't eat fast food, but sometimes when I work with couples, I'll say to the partners, you're both flipping your lids and not hearing each other. You need to put your lids back on. When we can think and work in our frontal cortex, we're not in fight or flight. When people are acting with power over, they're in their fight or flight modes. They're working from a very primitive place, as opposed to when we're working with the front part of our brains. That's where we can do power to and power with. That's what I often look for. Give me my Frosty. It was actually about a Diet Coke, whole other story. Any questions about this slide? I will not tell the story of me getting thrown out of Wendy's. That's another time. All right, then I'm going to bring you to the next one. And fortunately, we do have Marilyn Charwat with us today. And Marilyn put together some great tips. I added one. And I'd like to share the tips that Marilyn gave Robin, who I'm sharing with you today. So some strengthening connections with adult children. Here's some additional tips. Understand what your adult children want from you. And then understand what you want from them. This one resonated with me the most. Forgive the past. And I'm going to repeat that. Forgive the past. It does us no good to hold up somebody's past other than to shame them. And then we move into that power over mode. Learn to listen. Don't tell them how to live. Don't control with money. Focus on what you love about them and communicate it often. I say this as somebody who's been a therapist for 30 years. I don't think anything has more power sometimes than a parent's voice or comment. Never forget that you are always important to them. Forgive yourself for your parenting mistakes. I added this one, recognize your parenting successes. There are many things that you know you have done well as a parent or as a child, and take a moment to recognize them. Don't stand on ceremony. As I was preparing for this talk, I talked to Robin because the way I do anything professionally is I work in collaboration and I like to have conversations with people. So on Saturday afternoon, Robin and I were brainstorming, and this is Robin Rubin's film analogy. And she said, when your kids are born, you have a movie of what life is going to be and look like with them. Remember, your kids have their own movie. You can have a life of disappointment about what didn't happen, or you can find a way to embrace and enjoy what's happening and the way your movies come together. So with that, I thank you for having me, and we can take some time for questions and answers. I'll stop my share.
So before we get started with more questions, I just want to give credit to Phyllis Sandler, because that's actually what she told me. So, but I make it mine. So, and I think about
So
it.
give credit to your mom.
So it's kudos to Phyllis Sandler. So before we don't have that much time left, but we will take some questions, but we also are going to post a survey in the chat box. Ashley, will you do that, please? Post the survey it's just like a minute, it's just a minute thing. I'm going to ask you to just complete the brief survey. I don't see it. Oh, there we go. Great. And
yeah, Ashley just put it.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, we need an entire, Andrea said we need an entire series on this topic, and
We talked about that.
Agree. It needs to be a series. Are there any last minute questions that you have? I mean, David gave out his handout for this evening. Any last minute questions before I wrap it up? I'm looking in the chat box.
Please scroll up and do the Survey Monkey. It's really important to us.
Yes,
oh, Rachel's hands up.
Oh, Rachel's hands up. Go ahead, Rachel.
I think this is a difficult question to ask with only like a minute to respond, because like you said, this could be its own topic, but a lot of this advice is based on reciprocal relationships. And so what happens when you don't have that in either direction? And I know it comes down to boundaries and deciding how much you want to take or cutting someone off, but what resources or what advice would you say in a general capacity that you do in one direction where the other one is not respectful?
So I'll answer your question using the concept of prognosis. So if you ask a clinician, what's their prognosis of how something will work out? If both parties are respectful, you have a better prognosis of it working out. And if both parties, one of them is not respectful, it's going to compromise the outcome.
So, Dr. David, Jan Savrick is asking, like, how, in the situation that she's in, I mean, there's so much hurt involved in it, what can she?
I don't personally, John, to your question, I don't really think we need to stop appropriate emotions. Sometimes the hurt is appropriate and we need to get help for it and find ways to cope with it. But the first thing I do when I feel an emotion or I see somebody in my office feeling emotion, I want to know that it's valid.
Yeah.
I want to support that pain is valid and real. Makes sense?
Yeah. And I would say a very, like, almost a serious conversation with the two of them is necessary to kind of explain how you're feeling. But Jan, we can talk about that another time. So this has been an absolute, I just want to check 1 second. I just want to make sure there's nothing else. Okay.
We're good.
This has been a fantastic conversation. Obviously, we're just about out of time. We can never have too much health, happiness in our lives. So I hope you were able to learn some new tools tonight that you can start using right away. Dr. David, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say every one of us will take away a few helpful tips to use, as Andrea said, in all parts of our life, to help us lead better, healthier, and happier lives and have better contact with our adult children and in being adult children. To everyone on the call, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Remember to check out our meditations and our event calendar and take good care. We look forward to seeing you again at the Robin Rubin Center for Happiness and Life Enhancement in the very near future. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being here.
I'll stay on with you guys for a minute once everybody signs off.
Dave.